Hide your tone thy calm, reflective and personal. Like Simon Sinek, we live in a world that teaches us if you're alone, you're broken. But what if I told you that being alone is not a weakness? It's a strength. The happiest people aren't those surrounded by crowds. They're the ones who've learned how to sit with themselves and still feel whole. Welcome to Minshift Moments. Today we're flipping the script on loneliness and unlocking the secret to being truly happy alone. Most people don't realize this, but happiness doesn't start with what you have or who you're with. It starts with understanding why you feel the way you feel when you're alone. That why is everything. Because if you can't sit with yourself in silence without feeling anxious, lost, or empty, it's not the silence that's the problem. It's that you haven't figured out what that discomfort is trying to tell you. We often rush to fill our loneliness with noise, social media, endless scrolling, meaningless texts, the next meetup, the next distraction, and we call that connection. But connection without understanding is just noise. And noise doesn't make you happy, it makes you numb. The real journey starts when you begin asking yourself, why do I fear solitude? Why do I associate being alone with being less? Somewhere along the way, we were conditioned to believe that being surrounded by others meant we were valuable, that constant companionship was the proof of worth. But that's a lie. That's marketing. That's culture feeding us a narrative to keep us dependent on external approval. The truth is, solitude isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. It reflects everything we haven't dealt with yet. Our insecurities, our doubts, our need to be seen, liked, validated. And that's exactly why we run from it. But when you have the courage to sit with those feelings and dig deeper into them, that's where growth begins. When you strip away the distractions and ask, why am I afraid to be with myself? You start uncovering the root causes. Maybe it's fear of rejection. Maybe it's unhealed wounds from childhood. Maybe it's shame or self-doubt or the belief that you're not enough unless someone else says so. Whatever it is, when you start with why, you begin a dialogue with yourself that's honest, that's raw, that's real, and most importantly, it's the foundation of actual happiness, the kind that doesn't crumble when people leave or plans change. See, the goal isn't to be alone forever. The goal is to not be afraid of being alone. There's a difference. It's not about isolation, it's about independence. When you understand your own mind, when you're clear about why you feel empty in solitude, you can begin to fill that space with purpose, not panic. You stop depending on people to be your happiness, and instead, people become a bonus to your already fulfilling life. That's a powerful shift. That's a mind shift. Because now you're not chasing connection to fill a void. You're offering connection from a place of wholeness. I've met so many people who are constantly surrounded by friends, co-workers, partners, but still feel lonely. Why? Because they haven't asked the deeper questions. They haven't explored what makes them feel valuable without applause. And so they keep living in reaction to messages, to likes, to attention. They keep outsourcing their self-worth to people who are just as lost. That's not happiness, that's dependency. That's a mask. But when you pause, when you unplug, and when you genuinely reflect on why solitude makes you uncomfortable, you're not just facing loneliness, you're transforming it. You're turning it into self-awareness, into strength, into clarity. You stop being afraid of your own thoughts. You stop needing someone else to tell you who you are. You begin to listen to that quiet voice inside you that's been drowned out by the noise. And you start rebuilding your identity, not based on the crowd, but based on your core. That's why the journey to happiness begins not with what you do, but with what you ask. Ask better questions. Ask deeper questions. Why am I uncomfortable with myself? What am I really searching for? Whose voice is defining my value right now? These questions are not quick fixes. They're not Instagram quotes. They're deep, hard questions that open the door to true peace. But the people who dare to ask them and answer them honestly are the ones who learn to be happy alone. And once you've done that, you're never really alone again. You don't fear solitude anymore. You welcome it. Because you've realized that the person you used to avoid in the quiet is the very person you needed to know all along. One of the most overlooked relationships in our lives is the one we have with ourselves. We invest time, energy, and emotion into understanding others, trying to be there for them, support them, love them. But rarely do we put that same intention into how we relate to ourselves. And that's the root of the problem. Because how can we ever truly be happy alone if we haven't learned how to be in a relationship with ourselves first? Think about it. If you had a friend who constantly criticized you, doubted you, ignored your needs, and never spent quality time with you, would you enjoy their company? Probably not. Yet that's how many of us treat ourselves every single day. We speak harshly to ourselves, we downplay our achievements, we abandon our own needs in favor of pleasing others. And then we wonder why being alone feels uncomfortable. It's not loneliness that's hurting us. It's the poor relationship we've built with ourselves. When we don't love ourselves, being alone becomes unbearable, because in that silence, we're left with someone we haven't learned to appreciate. But the shift happens when you start treating yourself like someone you're responsible for caring for. When you look at yourself with compassion, not criticism. When you begin to honor your own time, your own boundaries, your own joy. That's when solitude transforms from emptiness into empowerment. Most people wait to feel loved until someone else gives them permission. They wait for a partner, a compliment, a text, something external to confirm their value. But that's not love. That's dependency disguised as affection. Real love, the kind that sustains happiness even in solitude, starts with your ability to love yourself first. To accept who you are, not in some distant future, but right now, flawed, learning, growing human. Loving yourself doesn't mean you think you're perfect. It means you're willing to sit with your imperfections and still choose kindness over judgment. It means you stop chasing worthiness and start recognizing it's already there. It's in how you talk to yourself when no one's around. It's in how you respond to failure, how you bounce back from disappointment, how you show up for yourself when things get hard. That's where self-trust is built. That's where the foundation of a meaningful inner life begins. When you build a strong relationship with yourself, alone time becomes sacred. It becomes the space where you reflect, recharge, and realign. You no longer feel the urge to fill every moment with stimulation or people, because you've learned to enjoy your own company. You laugh with yourself. You encourage yourself. You know how to sit in a room, just you, and still feel content. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've made peace with who you are. And when that happens, something amazing begins to shift. You stop settling. You stop tolerating relationships that drain you, jobs that don't fulfill you, and habits that keep you small. Because the more time you spend building a healthy relationship with yourself, the less willing you are to accept anything that compromises your peace. You realize that you are not alone because no one wants you. You are alone because you finally value yourself enough to choose quality over noise. It's not about becoming self-absorbed. It's about becoming self-aware. There's a difference. Awareness leads to growth. And when you grow internally, your external life starts to shift. You attract better conversations, deeper friendships, more honest love. Not because you need them, but because you've made room for them from a place of wholeness. So many people are terrified of being alone because they've never taken the time to get to know themselves. They fill the silence with anything they can find just to avoid facing that unfamiliar person in the mirror. But the truth is, you will spend more time with yourself than anyone else in your life. Isn't it worth making that relationship the strongest one you have? Because when you love the person you are when no one's watching, you no longer feel the need to prove your worth to anyone else. And that is the kind of happiness no one can take away. There's something we need to talk about. Distraction. It's everywhere. We live in a world where we've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly doing something, we're wasting time. And when we find ourselves alone, the first instinct for most people is to reach for something. Their phone, the TV remote, an app, anything. Because being alone with our thoughts feels uncomfortable. But distraction doesn't cure loneliness. It just delays the moment you're forced to deal with it. And the truth is, the longer you delay that moment, the longer you remain stuck. We've made distraction a habit. It's automatic, feeling bored. Scroll, feeling lonely. Text someone, feeling anxious. Bing, watch something. But here's the question. Are those things actually making you happy? Or are they just keeping you from noticing that you're not? See, distraction gives us the illusion of engagement, but not the reality of growth. And growth is what actually leads to fulfillment. Growth is what gives solitude its meaning. When you start using your alone time intentionally, instead of numbing it with temporary pleasure, something shifts. You begin to realize that every quiet moment is actually an opportunity, not a void to be filled. It's a moment to reflect, to learn, to build something. Maybe it's a skill you've always wanted to explore, or a part of yourself you've been neglecting. Maybe it's reading that book you keep saying you'll get to. Maybe it's journaling the thoughts that have been building up inside. Maybe it's just sitting still and learning to breathe without needing to fix or chase or prove anything. That's when time alone stops being something to escape and starts becoming something to use. The reason so many people feel unhappy alone is because they're trying to escape themselves instead of trying to understand themselves. And escaping becomes addictive. But what's even more addictive and far more rewarding is progress. When you spend time growing, you're not just filling time, you're expanding. You're evolving. You're creating a version of yourself that feels proud, capable, grounded. And that builds confidence. Not the loud, external kind, but the quiet kind that says, I'm okay, even if no one's watching. That's the real secret. Learning to replace distraction with growth. And I'm not talking about productivity for the sake of achievement. I'm talking about the kind of growth that aligns with who you want to become. The kind that asks, what kind of person am I when no one's around? And am I proud of that person? Because if the answer is no, distraction will only cover that discomfort, not solve it. But growth, real intentional growth, starts to transform it. And here's something else to think about. When you begin to invest in yourself during your alone time, you're not just changing your present, you're changing your future. The habits you form in solitude are the ones that build resilience, creativity, discipline. Those are the things that don't just make you happier alone. They make you stronger in every part of your life. When you develop yourself in the quiet moments, you walk into the noisy ones with a different kind of power. Not because you're louder, but because you're centered. There's nothing wrong with rest or with enjoying your downtime, but there's a difference between rest and avoidance. One recharges you. The other drains you without you even realizing it. And when you use solitude to avoid, it becomes painful. But when you use solitude to evolve, it becomes purposeful. The most fulfilled people I've met, the ones constantly surrounded by others. They're the ones who've figured out how to use time alone to deepen who they are. They've discovered how to turn every moment without company into a chance to become more complete. That's not lonely, that's powerful. That's self-leadership. So the next time you find yourself alone, ask yourself, am I distracting myself right now or developing myself? Because one leads to escape, and the other leads to freedom. If you want to be happy alone, you have to redefine what happiness even means to you. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Most of us never pause to ask ourselves, what does happiness actually look like for me? Instead, we inherit definitions from family, from culture, from social media. We're told that happiness means being in a relationship, having a big group of friends, going to parties, being liked, being followed, being seen. So, when we find ourselves alone, we assume something's wrong, that we failed, that we're behind. But maybe we're not behind. Maybe we're just following someone else's path, and that's why it doesn't feel right. The problem is never the solitude. It's the story we tell ourselves about what solitude means. And that story is almost always based on someone else's version of success. We scroll through highlight reels and compare our quiet, unfiltered lives to their polished, filtered moments. But happiness isn't found in the number of people you're with. It's found in how aligned your life is with your own values. When you're chasing someone else's definition of happiness, even being in a room full of people can feel empty. But when you start defining your own, everything changes. That begins with clarity. What actually matters to you? Not what you were told should matter. Not what looks good online. But what makes you feel whole? Maybe it's quiet mornings. Maybe it's meaningful work. Maybe it's time in nature, deep conversations, reading, creating, contributing. These aren't flashy things. They won't always get you applause. But they might be what your soul has been asking for all along. And if you don't slow down and define it for yourself, the world will define it for you. And the world's definition will always leave you wanting more. Because the world rewards performance, not peace. It celebrates the visible. The relationship photos, the vacation snapshots, the parties. But real happiness often happens in moments no one sees. In the way you breathe deeper because you're no longer pretending. In the way you enjoy your own company without needing to post about it. In the quiet satisfaction of knowing you're living in alignment with who you are, not who you're expected to be. And here's the truth, that kind of happiness requires courage. Because when you define success on your own terms, you will disappoint some people. You will walk away from trends. You'll choose silence over noise, depth over popularity, growth over comfort. And not everyone will understand that. But the people who matter won't need you to explain. And more importantly, you won't need their approval, because you'll have your own. When you're clear about your own metrics, you stop playing someone else's game. You stop chasing things that never really fit you in the first place. You stop feeling inadequate when you're alone, because you know that your alone time is intentional. It's part of your design, and even if no one else gets it, you do. And that's enough. It's ironic, isn't it? We spend so much time trying to fit into what others call happiness, only to feel more disconnected. But the moment you step back and say, "No, this is what matters to me," you reclaim your power. You give yourself permission to stop performing, to start living. There's nothing wrong with companionship. There's nothing wrong with being part of a crowd. But those things should add to your happiness, not define it. The danger is when you make your worth dependent on how your life looks rather than how your life feels. And how it feels, that's what tells the truth. So if you want to be truly happy alone, stop measuring your life with someone else's ruler. Define your own values, your own priorities, your own rhythm. And once you do that, you'll discover that happiness isn't something you find in others. It's something you carry with you, no matter who's around or who isn't. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop seeking external validation and start building internal trust. That's the shift from loneliness to empowerment. See, most of us were raised in systems that taught us to measure our worth based on feedback. Grades, likes, compliments, performance reviews. So when we're alone and those signals disappear, we feel unsteady, unsure, even invisible. Not because we lack value, but because we've never practiced recognizing it from the inside out. And that's the work. Learning to trust your own voice in the absence of applause. When you begin that process, it feels uncertain at first. You're stepping away from the noise you're used to. The opinions, the expectations, the constant stream of comparison, and stepping into something quieter but deeper. Self-trust isn't loud. It doesn't shout for attention. It whispers. It's the calm voice that says, "You're okay. You're enough. You can handle this," even when the world doesn't acknowledge it. And the more you listen to that voice, the stronger it becomes. But it doesn't just show up on its own. It's built like a muscle. And the way you build it is through action, through consistency, through showing up for yourself when no one else is watching. You build it every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you choose integrity over approval, every time you decide to do what's right for you even if it goes against the crowd. And the reward, a kind of confidence that doesn't require an audience. Now, that's not always easy. We've been wired to doubt ourselves, especially in solitude. That voice of self-doubt, that critic in your mind, it gets loud when there's no one around to drown it out. But that voice isn't the enemy. It's just old programming. It's the accumulation of years of conditioning, past experiences and fears. And the way you overcome it isn't by silencing it, but by choosing a different voice. A voice rooted in values, not fear. A voice rooted in growth, not guilt. You won't get it right all the time. And that's okay. Building self-trust doesn't mean you never fail. It means you learn how to respond to failure in a way that deepens your relationship with yourself. You don't beat yourself up. You don't spiral. You acknowledge what happened, you take responsibility, and you move forward. That's how you earn your own respect. That's how you stop needing everyone else's. Because here's what happens when you stop seeking validation and start seeking alignment. Your decisions become cleaner. Your relationships become clearer. Your direction becomes stronger. You stop overthinking every choice because you trust your own judgment. You stop performing for approval and start acting from purpose. And the people who truly belong in your life, they'll see that, and they'll respect it. When you build internal trust, you stop asking questions like, "Am I good enough?" and start asking, "Is this right for me?" You stop looking outward for confirmation and start looking inward for clarity. That doesn't mean you shut others out. It means stop letting others define you. You welcome feedback, but you're not controlled by it. You hear opinions, but you don't chase them. You're rooted, anchored, grounded, even when you're alone. And there's a freedom in that, a peace that can't be faked, because it's not coming from something fragile or fleeting. It's coming from the one person you've learned to trust most of yourself. And when you can stand alone, trust your choices, respect your boundaries, and honor your path, that's not loneliness. That's strength. That's alignment. That's happiness. So if you're spending time alone and wondering how to be okay, start here. Listen to yourself. Honor what you know. Choose what aligns with your truth. Not the loudest voice, not the trendiest path, the one that makes sense to you. That's how you build something unshakable, something real. One of the most life-changing realizations you can have is this: your circumstances don't define your happiness, your mindset does. That might sound simple, but it's not easy. Because most of us were taught that happiness is something we find when everything lines up perfectly. When we get the job, meet the right person, buy the house, get the recognition, reach the goal. So, when we find ourselves alone, we assume something's missing. That happiness is somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered. But what if it's not out there? What if it's already within you, and all that's missing is the perspective to see it? Your mind is the lens through which you experience life. Two people can have the same circumstances and see them completely differently. One person sees solitude as loneliness, the other sees it as freedom. One sees an empty evening as a void, the other sees it as space to rest, reflect, or create. The difference isn't in the situation. It's in how they've trained their mind to interpret it. And that training begins the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this?" That question opens everything up, because it shifts you from being a passive observer of your life to an active participant in your growth. When you're alone, instead of resisting the silence, you begin to lean into it. You begin to ask deeper questions. You get curious about who you are without the noise, the labels, the expectations. And what you discover might surprise you. That peace isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of purpose. But that kind of mindset doesn't come naturally in a world built on comparison. We're constantly shown what we don't have. We're constantly being told what we need in order to be enough. And so we start believing the lie that if we're alone, we're lacking. That if we're not constantly surrounded by people or excitement or achievement, we're falling behind. But it's not true. In fact, the opposite is often true. Some of the most grounded, self-aware, and fulfilled people are those who've spent real time alone. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And they've used that time to get clear, to heal, to reframe their lives from the inside out. That's the gift of a growth mindset. It turns every moment, even the quiet and difficult ones, into a stepping stone. It stops defining life by what's missing and starts focusing on what's possible. When you have that mindset, solitude becomes a tool, not a threat. It becomes the space where you make decisions aligned with your values. The space where you reconnect to what truly matters. The space where you no longer need to chase happiness because you realize you're the one who creates it. Now, that doesn't mean you never feel lonely. It doesn't mean you never wish for connection or community. We're human. We're wired for connection. But when you learn how to cultivate a mindset that supports your growth, your happiness no longer depends on those things. It's enriched by them, but not dependent on them. That's the difference between need and choice. And when you live from choice, everything becomes lighter. You start showing up in relationships not from a place of emptiness, but from a place of wholeness. You stop tolerating things that go against your peace. You start pursuing goals not to prove anything, but to express something that's already alive in you. And that changes the energy you bring into every room, even if you walked in alone. This mindset isn't something you build once. It's something you practice daily, in the way you talk to yourself, in the thoughts you challenge, in the stories you choose to believe. Every day is an opportunity to either reinforce your limitations or rewrite them. And the more you practice choosing growth, the more natural it becomes. Until one day, being alone doesn't feel like something you need to escape. It feels like something you've mastered. Because happiness doesn't come from the outside filling you up. It comes from the inside overflowing. A mug close strong, invite reflection and engagement. Alone doesn't mean empty. It means available, to grow, to heal, and to finally connect with the one person who matters most in you. If this message helped you shift your mindset, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mindshift Moments. Drop a comment below. What's one thing you've learned to love about being alone? Let's grow together.